How do you guys feel about Dana White saying Edwards versus Covington is the fight to make? Remember, Covington's name was brought up when Fada mentioned him earlier. He was there. He weighed in. I don't think any of us knew that he was going to be the backup fighter. He, of course, was telling everybody he hopped on the plane, 1 day notice. I don't know how far out this was planned out. So it's not going to be the Burns Masvidal winner. Remember, 3-piece and a soda. It's not going to be Bilal Muhammad, who's won 8 straight. You heard me right. I heard him right. That's Dana saying it. The guy who doesn't make fights on fight night said Edwards versus Covington is next. Goes, react.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that one really hurts, I think, for a guy like Bilal Muhammad. I'm with you, George. I was completely shocked that news came out. But, I mean, Bilal Muhammad keeps getting the shaft, right? Like, eight fights in a row is so difficult to do, man, in any division. Him and Beneil Dariush, 2 guys who have streaks like that, and they just keep getting pushed aside, right? Like the UFC's forgetting his name. They're supposed to remember his name. That dude is a tough fighter, man, and I think he's done everything to deserve that title shot. Now, Colby Covington, I'm not a fool. I know he probably sells really well, and I would imagine if I'm Colby Covington and they tell me we need you to make weight on foreign soil, I would probably say something like, I'll do it. But guess what? I get the next shot. I would imagine something like that went down. I wish we had a little bit more news on that decision and how it would play out, because a guy like Bilal Muhammad absolutely deserves something like that. And I gave the comparison of Beneil Dariush, who maybe you can look at and say, well, all right, he's a little bit more quiet. He doesn't really ask for things. Bilal Muhammad's been asking this for a long time, right? Now you have a really messed up situation, because if Colby Covington gets in there, they're gonna if you look at like Leon Edwards getting a victory there, who are they gonna match him up with, right? Like, what if Masvidal gets a win there? Then that matchup comes out. Like, it's just really, really bad for a fighter who does everything they ask from him. He gets wins. He's vocal on the mic. He's fun to watch. I don't understand why his name wasn't called.
Yeah, and he's coming off a finish. Remember, people kept saying, well, he kind of goes to a decision. He had an emphatic finish. I believe it was Sean Brady in Abu Dhabi last year. So he has ticked all the boxes, but he's the one that's currently ticked off. Fada, up until 6 months ago, we used to say, all of us, well, Kobe's the second best welterweight on the planet. He's only lost to Usman, and he was very competitive versus Usman. And then 6 months ago, here comes Rocky Edwards with the head kick. He follows it up with the title defense. So he's kind of like just not really that guy anymore. It's like, I thought we kind of reshuffled the deck, and it should have been Bilal Muhammad. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, tough break for Bilal, because I spoke to him during when this happened, and he wanted to fight Colby on this card, and it would have made sense to dub that as a number 1 contender fight. So Bilal's always been willing to fight. He's one of those guys in the division that has said yes to everybody they've put in front of him. And to hear Dana later on say that they want to match him with Shavkat Rakhmonov is, I mean, I already thought the Sean Brady fight was risky for Bilal. It looked like it was a way to potentially build Sean Brady off of him, and he put a halt to that. He took the O from his unbeaten record, and he finished him after people criticized that he doesn't put guys away. And now they want to put him against Shavkat Rakhmonov, where obviously in Rakhmonov's case, he has a lot to gain. He's fighting a top contender with a winning streak. For Bilal, it's just another opportunity to halt a hype train. But then what? You've got Leon Edwards saying that he wants to fight, if Jorge Masvidal beats Gilbert Burns. He's looking at that. Leon Edwards saying, I don't want to fight Colby. Colby doesn't deserve it. He went on to admit that, it's not necessarily that he thinks Jorge deserves it, but they've got that beef to settle. So it's just a bit of a logjam that we're in right now. And I think a lot will depend on who wins between Masvidal and Burns, because if Leon will get his say and he will get Masvidal, if Masvidal beats Burns, then you got to make Colby and Bilal. I think that's the fight to make, as opposed to Rakhmonov. I love Shavkat Rakhmonov, and I see title contention in his future too. But I just think if we're going through a pecking order, I don't know what's going to happen, because Leon right now is saying that he does not want to fight Colby Covington and he doesn't think he deserves it. So is Leon going to get what he wants? And what if Burns beats Masvidal? Then what? So I don't know. It depends on, UFC dubbed Colby as the number 1 contender. Let's see if Leon will actually take it or go a different direction.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, I want you to chime in on the topic, obviously, but I want to throw one more on your plate, and that's champions do usually get a say as to who they want to fight, you know. But I feel like that comes a little bit later, maybe like when you get to that fourth title defense, and maybe some are on repeat and you got to do the rematches or whatever. It's still early on in Leon's career. What do you remember from covering the sport? Like, does the UFC just kind of make the match and say, here it is? Or when do they start kind of consult and say, hey, we're partners in this?
I mean, it's, again, all circumstantial, right? It depends on the person, what position they're in, how far into the raid, and how much, star power and things like that they have on their side. For Leon, I don't necessarily think he has that quite yet. I mean, it's going to come down to how him and his management team can discuss with the UFC if they really don't want this Colby Covington fight and are wanting to draw a line in the sand. Maybe Leon suddenly has an injury that needs to be taken care of and he's out 6-8 months, and Colby doesn't have a choice but to fight someone else in the meantime. Like, there's so many different ways that this could go potentially. But again, it's just, you see, Tim Simpson as manager in that video, like, how hard do they want to push back here? It's kind of hard to, I get like the personal side of the Jorge Masvidal thing. And if he wins against Gilbert Burns, especially spectacularly, there is that storyline there, much more of one than there is with Colby. But we know Colby, has, for better or worse, his following. And right now he's someone who's kind of in a good position. You just listen to what Farah said there. Like, yeah, you can make a case here and there for everyone. And you can make a case here and there almost against everyone. Like, we did see Bilal and Leon fight a full round, and that fight didn't look like it was going to go too kindly to Bilal if it kept going. I know the eye poke was early in the second and there was a lot of fight to still be had, but we have seen a flash of that, and a fight between Colby and Leon is something fresh, something new that we haven't seen at this point. So I get why they're trying to do this, but yeah, I mean, if you're Leon, I think this is a pretty high selling fight for you. If you're the champion getting the pay-per-view points, I don't know if it's radically different from Masvidal, and it's kind of hard to sit there and say Colby doesn't deserve the shot, but Masvidal does, even if he beats Gilbert Burns, when Colby just beat Masvidal pretty lopsidedly not that long ago. It's basically the only personal element in the three-piece Minnesota thing that you're trying to use to sell that fight. So to me, there's a lot of complicated factors in this. I don't think there's anyone who's necessarily getting screwed over here. I know, like, Bilal in theory has the best case, but Dana White has said how many times before and after the Covington versus Usman fights, if Kamaru Usman didn't exist, Colby Covington is the best welterweight in the world and the champion. Yeah. Well, Kamaru Usman is no longer the champion. So I guess Dana White wants to find out if his theory is accurate or not. So I guess that's what we're going to find out now.
Yeah, and Dana really leaned into, hey, this guy hopped on a plane, he came in, he dropped the weight, he was ready to go, and
they knew that was happening for a few weeks. I mean, it was kept well under wraps, but kind of talking about it after the fact, now that it came out, it sounds like at least Leon's side knew that was a possibility. I don't know what Kamaru and his team knew. But yeah, if Colby Covington, you hear him say that he found out on Tuesday and flew over Wednesday, cut weight Thursday and weighed in Friday, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I've taken that one with a grain of salt for sure. And also, I think he was willing to fight both of them at the same time.
For sure.
He mentioned that one as well.
And if I could chime in, like, because Dana, when they'd asked Dana about Colby, he said, Colby hasn't been turning down fights. So it seems like the UFC really want Colby Covington in this position, which is why they gave him the call. Because Bilal, when I spoke to him as well, he was talking about wanting to be the backup, but the UFC never contacted him to be the backup. So it seems like that's what the UFC wants. And if you're Colby Covington, it's not like you're going to say no. So at the end of the day, he is coming off of a win over Jorge Masvidal, and UFC called him to be the backup. And it seems like, what Mike referred to earlier with Dana saying that if Kamaru wasn't champion, that he would. It seems like the UFC want Colby Covington in this position. So, if you're Colby, what are you going to say? No, I want to fight somebody else than the title shot. So.
And then the ultimate way, I mean, if UFC, I think, had its perfect world druthers, Colby Covington beats Leon Edwards, Conor McGregor beats Michael Chandler, and you have Colby Covington versus Conor McGregor for a UFC title. Love it or hate it, that would do something.
I keep forgetting those guys keep insisting at 170. And yes, Conor they were asking him about that, him versus Edwards. But because he's such a unicorn, anything is possible with the Irishman. Ireland versus England, or like Mike said, versus Colby. Oh my God. Yeah, it is. That's a lot to take in.